Welcome to another Days Cars video on modifying and improving my lathe. No? Okay. Welcome to a Days Cars video on modifying and improving my mill. Not that either? Days Cars. Maybe it should be about cars. Welcome to a Days Cars video on a homemade coilover front suspension for a 64.5 Ford Mustang. You may look at that and say, I've seen that before, and you'd be right. There are a lot of companies out there that make and distribute very similar products. But at $3,000 to $4,000 a kit, there's an advantage to making all the parts yourself. The nice thing about this front suspension is it's basically the Ford design. The upper control arm length, the lower control arm length, and the basic geometry is all Ford. The magic happens, however, right here. By moving the spring from the upper control arm down to the lower control arm, you vastly improve handling and ride quality. The result is a car that tracks better and does not have a harsh ride when doing it. Let's start at the top. This mount fits in the OEM coil spring pocket and gives the coilover shock something to attach to. We move down to the upper control arm. I started this project about 10 years ago and my welding skills were good, but not fantastic at the time. So I was able to pick up a set of aftermarket upper control arms and figured that would be the safest option. If I was going to do it now, I think I would just make them. But then that was the better choice. The upper control arm then attaches into the spindle, which ties down to the lower control arm. And we have the bottom mount for the coilover shock. Just like a normal Mustang suspension, we have the sway bar end link. On the front side, I have eliminated the stock strut rod. We now have a 3/8 plate taking its place, tying the lower control arm into the strut rod assembly. I wanted this to be in double shear, so I fabricated this upper bracket to tie the end of the strut rod to the shock mount. As we come up the strut rod, we have a nice mount and joint on this end. So what's the advantage of a suspension like this? It's pretty much the basic Ford design with a fancy coilover. That's a true statement. The difference is by moving the connection point of the spring from here to here, you are significantly affecting the way imperfections in the road and suspension movement is transferred into the spring, which results in better handling and much, much better ride quality. I have some shims. Time to align the car. No, we don't use shims anymore? The 65-66 Mustang was originally aligned with shims, nothing else. By shimming the mounts of the upper control arm here and here, you affected caster by changing the angle this way and this way of the upper control arm. And by moving the whole assembly out, you adjusted camber. With this setup, that is no longer needed. To adjust caster, all you have to do is lengthen or shorten this rod. To adjust camber, all you have to do is lengthen or adjust the lower control arm. And it's just as simple as twisting. This strut rod has left-handed thread on one end and right-handed thread on the other. The advantage to that is if you twist it one direction, it'll get longer. If you twist the swage tube the other direction, it'll get shorter. The same is true of my lower control arm. By turning this adjuster nut one direction, the lower control arm gets longer. By turning it the other direction, it gets shorter. Again, this is how you adjust camber. This is how you adjust caster. So let's take a closer look at the parts that make this assembly. We start with the shock tower cap. That's this piece right here. It goes on top of the shock tower, and the shock tower is sandwiched between this and the upper coilover mount. There's notches in here to clear the spring pocket, and we have 4 holes. You can see them more easily here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those holes are in the top plate are eventually going to be squared so that I can use smooth and stainless carriage bolts. I used 4 because stainless is not necessarily the strongest material. It's not as strong as, say, a grade 5 or a grade 8 bolt. But by having 4 and having them be 3/8, it should be plenty strong, especially since all the suspension force is being held against the top of the shock tower. Then we have the upper control arm. Like I said, I purchased this. I could have made it myself. At the time, like I said, my welding skills, not as good as they are now. My welder was not the quality of what it is now. And I just didn't really want to risk it. So when I had the opportunity to pick these up at a good price, I did. Then we go to the QA1 shock. This is an adjustable shock. I've got 12 adjustments for stiffness of the shock, and I can also adjust about 3 inches of ride height on the spring itself. Great way to get everything dialed in. Here we have the lower mount. It's actually made of 3 pieces. You have the shock mount. You have the tie bar that ties the shock mount into the lower plate and again puts the strut rod in double shear. And then you have the lower mount. Now please excuse the rust on some of these things. They were water jet cut and they haven't been powder coated yet, but they will be. This right here is the heaviest fabrication that I had to do to build this kit. This is the lower control arm. I started with a stock lower control arm, cut it off. I notched it and bent it in so that it would meet up with the diameter of my adjustment nut. I added a screw-in ball joint so that it could handle the forces that were now being applied from having a coilover suspension. On the back side, I boxed it all in, made a pocket so that I could still get access to the sway bar end link, and there's a sleeve welded in right here that is where the adjustment is. Then up here we have a female heim joint, and then I've got 2 spacers that fit inside the heim joint to neck it down to 1/2 inch and make it so that it fits in the lower control arm pocket. Last couple pieces we have are the strut rod. Pretty basic. I've got a solid rod end joint here. I've got a heim end joint here. The heim joint fits inside this mount, which mounts up inside the pocket in the upper frame of the car, and that gives me perfect flexibility at this connection. In other words, this rod has the ability to flex and move without any binding like it would if there was rubber bushings or polyurethane bushings there. So you may be wondering, why did I install this type of front suspension on my car? Aside from the obvious improvements in handling and ride quality, I needed something that would pair nicely with that. That is an independent rear suspension out of a Jaguar that has been installed in my Mustang. I might add as a bolt-in, but that is a different video.
If you like what you've seen, please click like. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe. Thanks for watching.